Venkat, our MAir director, faculty member in aerospace engineering, will give you now 40,000, 50,000, what, I don't know what we're going to say, foot view of AAM and the landscape and what we're trying to insert into the sort of research opportunities that we see. Thanks, Venkat.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
All right. Greg has given back 5 minutes, at least according to this timer. I don't know if that is true or he gave himself 25 minutes and made me think that he gave us 5 minutes back. We'll find out. So I think we're at a very exciting time, as you saw, right? I think there's a enormous amount of opportunities that are inbound, almost too many, right, for us to be able to field. And I think there's two major things happening, and I want to sort of try and present a perspective on what are the key elements that are happening in aerospace. So it's a very exciting time. We're in sort of the second century of aeronautics. You may not know this, right? University of Michigan is the oldest aerospace department in the world, right? 1914, right? 5 years right after the historic Wright brothers flight, right? So it's extraordinary because Wright brothers were bicycle repairmen, right? And then they changed to aerospace, right? And in a sense, we're sort of continuing that legacy, like converting or retrofitting a driving facility into something that could now provide capabilities in the air. And there's, I think, two main things that I want to try and convey today. First is for you to know a new phrase called the low altitude economy. And I'm going to tell you what that is. Okay, so there's one thing that you want to take away from my talk, that is that. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the status of advanced air mobility and where we are. And so let's dive in, right? So there's a number of things that have happened in advanced air mobility that I think are really turning a corner, similar to, I think the things that are happening in autonomous driving, right? There is a really exciting transition point where there's some very key regulatory hurdles that are being overcome, and we're sort of in the phase of industrial scaling. Greg mentioned something about this submission that we were a part of called EIPP, but I want to talk a little bit about the EIPP program in general and what that means for the prospect of crewed and uncrewed commercial operations for electric aircraft. As part of the executive order on drone dominance last June, there was a section on launching this electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft integration pilot program. It was another one of these crazy FAA submissions, right, where the call comes out and then you have like 3 weeks to pull everything together. And 8 teams were selected, 7 of which focus on actual electric aircraft operations, and then 1 on autonomous operations around sort of all the associated elements inside an airport. So, crewed ground operations and things like that. So the exciting thing here is these 7 proposals that were funded by the FAA allows electric aircraft to start to meaningfully integrate in a number of use cases. Okay? And this is, I think, a very, very exciting possibility and an exciting frontier. And what this allows is a clear pathway from here towards the final sort of certification milestones that some of these companies are aiming to bridge. The other exciting thing is this allows communities to start to understand the potential of electric aviation and how that might benefit the community, right? Especially around increased safety that comes from distributed propulsion. We'll talk a little bit about that. Noise, because these electric aircraft, because of the fact that they have many propellers, right? The tip Mach number is much smaller than conventional helicopters or other aircraft. And then, of course, new opportunities and new complexities associated with UTM, so traffic management. I'll just give you a short sort of rundown of the categories of teams that were selected. There's sort of 3 main categories: eVTOLs, so those are basically going to take off vertically and then land vertically. Okay, so which means that they have some mechanism by which they can generate thrust immediately upward. Then there is a category called short takeoff and landing, which is basically the size of a football field, right? So you can land in the size of our wonderful football field here. And then CTOL is conventional takeoff, so you need a regular runway, right? And Beta, which is a CTOL, right, actually was on all 7 of the submissions that were selected, okay, which is actually quite extraordinary. Joby, which is a VTOL, was on 5 of the submissions. Electra is a short takeoff and landing aircraft, has a lot of close connections to Michigan. Our state's chief innovation ecosystem officer was a former Electra team member, and they're very close with the Michigan Aerospace Department. So, we have an exciting opportunity where all of these elements are coming together, where the conventional takeoff and landing is trying to do cargo delivery, right? So some of the use cases that Greg mentioned, and then the VTOLs are trying to do sort of that last mile or last 20 miles, and then the STOLs are sort of trying to play in between, right? Here there's of course both pure electric and hybrid electric in terms of depending on the range that you need to address. I think the use cases that have now emerged, undoubtedly, right? So urban taxis, right? I think that is now very clearly starting to evolve, right? Joby did a demonstration in New York very recently, and numerous other cases. The regional connect, CTOL aircraft. So now, you can, for example, go to Burlington, Vermont, and like Beta flies like all the time, like it's routine, right? It's not even like, they don't even bat an eyelid for taking you from there to Boston or elsewhere. Medical logistics is emerging as sort of one of the dominant use cases, which is why we are very well positioned, right? Our deep integration with Michigan Medicine. Michigan Medicine is contracted with operators that already have electric aircraft on their horizon. So our operator has partnerships with Beta, intending to bring some of their Alia aircraft into the logistics. And of course, defense, right? So this is, I think, a really, important time frame, right? And actually, I was just at the Air Force facility in Dayton a couple of days ago, and this is going to be one of the first use cases where these electric aircraft, because of the fact that they have a quiet both takeoff and landing signature, right, are going to be very, very crucial. And I want to just talk a little bit about sort of commercialization. This is actually a photo I took 2 days ago. I visited the Joby factory in Dayton, Ohio, and I really want to underscore what is happening in the greater Midwest area, right? I think we are basically emerging. Right? There is basically a new Seattle that is going to emerge, right? And the new Seattle is the sort of next generation of aerospace companies that are going to scale manufacture. And Ohio, we lost out. We were the runner-up for Joby's when Joby was doing the site selection. But I think we're sort of this area is emerging as the hub for this activity. And Joby, this facility is right next to Dayton Airport, and then they also acquired another facility, 700,000 square foot facility in Dayton, Ohio. I saw the propeller blade manufacturing. It is indeed active, like test reports say. The rest of the stuff is getting manufactured in Marina, California, and they hope to go to a production of about 4 aircraft per month in 27. Okay, of course, certification, all those things. So depending on that, where this gets deployed, I think will be interesting to see. Another one, Beta, right? So they are, operating a large facility. Their order book is massive. There's a hugely successful IPO, right? So it's starting to turn a corner where it's not just, private companies that are funded by venture dollars, but really meaningful commercial traction in this space. And so this whole area, this whole industrialization of electric aircraft enabled by new concepts associated with what is possible is fundamentally transforming the economy. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the low altitude economy. Okay, and I think we're gonna probably change that from the future to 40,000 foot to 1,000 1,000-foot view, right? Because this is a incredible new opportunity, and it's going to transform every aspect of the economy. It's not, we don't know exactly what are all the places where this effect is going to be felt, but the number of use cases that are imagined and might emerge in the future is unbelievable. The sort of scale of this opportunity, right? So depending on sort of, who you ask, right, is, to the tune of about 1.5 trillion. And it really is due to a few different things that are coming together. First is all of the technology stack that has been developed in autonomy. Okay, so the incredible technology stack in perception, right, and planning, that combined with what has happened with electric, with respect to electric vehicles, right, that has allowed us to now build these miniaturized vehicles that have extraordinary combination of endurance, range, and payload capability. So this is, I think, a pretty incredible transformation. Some of the use cases that we are trying to play into, right, is in the industrial space, right? There is a lot of effort in inspection, 3D mapping, monitoring of critical assets, right, power line, etc. What we are trying to do, we also submitted a internal proposal to the strategic infrastructure fund, I think. Investment fund, strategic investment fund, SIF, internally at University of Michigan to start to address all of these use cases. And so on the industrial side, right, Mcity, right, the facility, there are buildings, but there are no roofs, right? So we need the three-dimensionality, right, to be able to do various things associated with that. Then there's obviously public safety, right? This is, nearly universally accepted that this is going to fundamentally be transformed, both in terms of, all the various DPSS units, emergency drone as a first responder. There's sort of swarms of drones, so there's a lot of opportunity there. And then, of course, logistics. Logistics is now starting to become mainstream, right? We've had a number of inbound from Primaire, actually, in terms of building our capabilities to give them the unique kinds of scenarios that they'd like to plan for, right? Everyone's driveway is a bit different, and, all the sort of complexity around that. And then, all the sort of other elements associated with, delivering drones. There are even, things imagined where buildings might have, different versions of, new versions of mailboxes. So there's sort of all kinds of phenomena that is being considered. And so this is, I think, coming, right? And Walmart has a big contract with Ving, right? And Michigan Medicine has been evaluating a number of these providers for a while, but things are now turning a corner. And so I think that these are sort of some of the opportunities, right? There's numerous other opportunities, right, that are sort of emerging, and we are trying to play into it. One other one that I think we are very well positioned is agriculture. Right, agriculture is going to be fundamentally transformed by drones, right? Because what used to be done with large tractors now can be done with a small drone, right? And the capability is enormous. The footprint, the benefits are numerous. And the wonderful thing is we have a beautiful arboretum, right, that we can partner with. And so this is another one that we're trying to actively engage in. The sort of the expected growth in this area is primarily driven by logistics, but I think inspections this is sort of the commercial opportunity. Obviously, I'm not talking about the defense opportunity, right? The defense opportunity is enormous, right? So, the division that handles this, right, last year, had a budget in the millions, and then suddenly now, right, this year they have a $50 billion budget allocation, right? Only the Space Force had a larger budget allocation. But just in the commercial sector, right, logistics is, very clearly on track. And then inspection and agriculture. I think this is a very exciting opportunity. And I think what we are positioned to do with MAIR, with our capabilities, with our infrastructure, is to play a very crucial part in accelerating this ecosystem. I'll just close with a few points on sort of challenges that I think we can position ourselves well. First is nearly all of these use cases require beyond visual line of sight operation. So that means that there's some infrastructure that needs to be set up around radar systems, remote ID, various kinds of things. In fact, the first set of partnerships that we will hopefully get all the members signed and announced next week at Exponential are anchored around this. So we believe that we will have a brilliant test bed for beyond visual line of sight operation. Energy constraints, right? This is, I think, an area that I personally work in. Is the energy density of batteries is a huge limiting factor for range, endurance, and payload. Here, Michigan is uniquely positioned because of our Battery Lab 1.0, now Battery Lab 2.0. Actually, in this version of the electric vehicle center, there's actually an emphasis on drones and drone manufacturing that MAir will be a significant part of. I think there's a lot of concern around public acceptance, right? Actually, when we were pulling our proposal together for the FAA UAS test site submission, right? We had a number of local stakeholders that we reached out to for support, and many of them voiced, some of these concerns around how do we get public acceptance around, privacy concerns. Some of them real, some of them maybe just can be addressed by educating them on where things are. The last thing is supply chain, right? I cannot emphasize enough the complexities of the challenge in the supply chain associated with the low altitude economy. Every aspect of the supply chain does not have a robust domestic ecosystem, right? All the way, starting from the propeller blades to the batteries, to sort of various elements of what is needed, electric motors, carbon fiber composites. So I think this is a very, very critical area that our state is very much looking to MAir to provide guidance, right? I think they very much want to try and be the hub of manufacturing. There was a great New York Times story that talked about one of the companies relocating to Detroit because of the manufacturing base, right? And so with Joby advancing on advanced air mobility, Andrew also being local, 2 hours from here, I think we're in a really exciting time where the hub here could be the ecosystem for both advanced air mobility and the low altitude economy. And so I'm very, very excited. And I think there's a great opportunity to engage with all the current Mcity members and beyond. And I think there's going to be a mutually beneficial partnership between Mcity and MAir in terms of scaling both the ideas in automotive to aerospace and aerospace to automotive. All right, with that, I'll give back 2 minutes, or maybe that's for Q&A.
Let's see if there we go. Any questions for Venkat? I have a roving mic now. All right. Questions? Okay. Venkat also has a high-density battery company working in the UAS and AM space, so hit him up for questions on that too after this. All right. Thanks, Venkat.
Thanks, Greg.